Hey everyone, it's Rob and welcome to the pod. I'm grateful for your time today. I'm excited. We have an amazing guest today, Cathy Sloss Jones, who is president and CEO of Sloss Real Estate Company in Birmingham, Alabama. They are an urban redevelopment firm founded by her grandfather back in 1920. Her noteworthy achievements include an area called Pepper Place, which is a vibrant mixed-use design district in Birmingham, Alabama, home of the nationally recognized market at Pepper Place, which she started in 2000. The Farmers Market is amazing, bringing 10,000 people together from all walks of life. And it's an energy like you cannot imagine. She also developed Park Place, and that transformed blighted public housing into Birmingham's first Hope 6 project, and it's now a jewel of the downtown. She's led initiatives that created a new school, an organic urban teaching farm, and a YMCA youth development center for that community. She serves on boards including the Lakeshore Foundation, the Birmingham Museum of Art, and Sloss Furnaces. She chairs the Alabama chapter of the Urban Land Institute and serves on the National Steering Committee for LOCUS, Smart Growth America's coalition of real estate developers and investors. She attended Harvard University as a Loeb Fellow, which is really cool, in 2007, and was a visiting scholar at Harvard's Graduate School of Design in 2008. She's been honored with the Businesswoman of the Year, Women Who Make a Difference, Executives in Influence, Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Operation New Birmingham, and served on the Birmingham Girl Scouts of North Central Alabama board. And in 2017, she was chosen to be a member of the Alabama Academy of Honor. During this podcast, you'll learn about how urban development can bring us closer to each other and, most importantly, understand each other better, helping us understand how to listen more deeply. And one of her favorite pieces of advice, just be kind. We'll learn how and why it's important that we are kind, not only to those closest to us, but even to those we don't know. And so I hope you enjoy our conversation together. Thank you for listening in. Hi, Cathy. Thanks so much for taking time to chat with me today.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's a thrill. I have been looking forward to this for quite some time. You and I spoke 2 weeks or so ago, and I just enjoyed our conversation so much and have been really looking forward to this ever since. I read in some of our research, I read that your best piece of advice is to be kind, because kindness matters, and love the people you love as much as you can. Can you tell me about that feeling that it evokes for you and why that's one of your favorite pieces of advice?
You know, it's funny when you mention it. I remember that we were working on a project in a neighborhood, and I wrote in the wet concrete, kindness matters. And I think it's just the most important thing to carry with you through life. If you can be kind to people, I know how much it means to me when people are kind to me. That is just the best we can do. So I always try to keep that mantra in front of me if I can.
It's so simple, yet for some reason it gets forgotten or seems hard, maybe because internally there's not a genuine feeling, but it really is a strong practice where you can make somebody's day each and every day, no matter who they are, through simple acts of kindness.
And not just love the people you love, it's just you love whoever you're with at that moment. You know, if it's someone helping you with in a project, or someone you meet on the street, It just makes a huge difference to smile and be kind. And
Mm-hmm.
I always find that I get that right back in return.
You do. How about those that have a certain, definition of love? Sometimes you hear, say, like in relationships, people will say, I don't even know if I want to say I love you to that person. So from that sort of mindset, we may think that love means something other than maybe the way you or I just are describing it. How can we love someone that we hardly know or maybe don't even know at all?
Well, because they're just like us. I think we love ourselves, and we love all of those around us, and it just flows back and forth to me. It's interesting, and some meditation practice I've been working on. I always do a metta meditation, is thinking about someone who's so close to you that you love. And I think of my grandchildren, or my puppy dog, or my husband, and then of yourself, but then of strangers, so that you can move away from you to people you don't even know at all, and you really love them just as much. I think I told you that I've been involved with a farmers market for 20 years. And whenever I go to the farmers market, everybody just connects in the most extraordinary way. I don't know if it's an urban-rural connection, or it's just that the farmers are so extraordinary. But there is this sense of community and real genuine love for each other as you walk through a farmer's market that I always experience. So I think, you try to take that forward in anything you do and wherever you are, if you can.
Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned the farmer's market, and I wanted to talk to you about it. So perfect timing. I believe you were the founders, or one of the founders, of the Birmingham, Alabama farmer's market. Is that correct?
Yes, we started. It's called the Market at Pepper Place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right downtown. It's an old Dr. Pepper syrup plant, a historic one, made all the syrup east of the Mississippi. So it's a neighborhood that's now a district. These were all empty buildings, everything empty at the time in the late 90s. And I've always loved farming and gardening and farmers, period. And I was on a board of directors, and I would go to these meetings, and they would say, if we don't do something, there will be no small family farms left in Alabama in 2 years. It was that critical, because the farms were disappearing because of suburban sprawl and agribusiness. So we started this little market. Frank Stitt is a great chef in Birmingham, and the chefs were very instrumental in helping me start it. And it's grown and grown now to, 100 farmers and 10,000 people on a Saturday morning. This is pre-COVID. Now we're driving through, but that market has been the best thing I've ever done in my life. I just love it. Love the market. Love everybody that's part of it.
Could you ever have imagined that there'd be 10,000 people descending on this market when you first had a vision for it?
We did not. It's of course not. I mean, we could only find 7 farmers at the time in 2000 when we started it, because they were really struggling. The farmers said, we don't want our kids to be farmers. Farming is hard. And so they came along and tried this out, and we connected through this market the consumers directly to the farmers. And then the chefs helped nurture along the farmers' willingness to grow a huge variety of crops and try new things every year. So it just built on itself. But I think, I think everybody wants access to fresh, local, healthy foods. That's been a movement that's been across the whole country over the last 20 years. But I think there's this sense of community that we all felt. So now I'm not surprised at all that there are 10,000 people, because we love it. We just spread out and made more room. We have dogs and babies and music and cooking demonstrations and artisans and makers. So it's become a big event now in Birmingham, again, pre-COVID, for our city.
I think farmers markets are remarkable in that the way they bring the local community together, and in so many different ways, not just bringing that fresh local agriculture to the people, but it's what goes on even beyond that. Just seeing people, connecting with them, seeing the diversity, and there is an energy in the air that seems so inclusive. Is that what you find when this happens each week?
Absolutely. There are everybody, old people, young people, babies, dogs, every color shade, it is a, bring everyone in the community comes to that spot. And that's what makes it so wonderful. It just works. It is a place that it works for everyone in our city. And it's very, very important to that city for that reason.
We were talking prior to going on recording. And as we record this, we're in something like our 20th week of marches and protests around Black Lives Matter and the unfortunate death of George Floyd. And I wanted to ask you, because you've been so instrumental in civil rights in Birmingham. I think you were on the board of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, if I have that right. And can you talk about your involvement and kind of how does it rise up now for you with everything that you know about that?
Well, I would say, and I wouldn't say instrumental. I think, I've been very fortunate to have been born in a city like Birmingham, Alabama. And it's a city that really changed the world in terms of our civil rights history. It's an extraordinary history. And I'm old enough to have known many of the leaders of that movement. I think I told you that I was 10 years old in 1963 when the church, 16th Street Baptist Church, was bombed, which changed our city forever and the world. So growing up in that rich, rich history and being a part of a community that really tries hard to have deeper conversations. Wonderful mayor, whose name is Randall Woodfin. He's a great leader. He's been a lot on national television, so we're all very proud of Randall and the way he has worked with the whole community to really start to build a stronger conversation. We have the Civil Rights Institute, which is world-class. People come from all over to sort of study our history and to make connections with what happened in Birmingham. I think I mentioned to you one time that Desmond Tutu, I was with Desmond Tutu and Fred Shuttlesworth together in Birmingham. And Tutu said, we couldn't have done what we did in South Africa except for Birmingham. So Birmingham, the work that Fred did and Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy and all the foot soldiers and primarily the Black, but and also the white community in that work in the 50s and 60s is an extraordinary backdrop to grow up in and to learn and to be able to meet and know these individuals who are so extraordinary. So I've just been sitting at their feet, listening and trying to learn as much as I can. And we're now just moving, I think, into a much deeper conversation about race in America. We've got to have, it's so important. And again, I think Birmingham is a great place to have that conversation, certainly in our community and beyond. So,
You mentioned Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. Can you talk about who he is for those that may not know and how you are connected to him?
Well, Fred is a great, I think, unsung hero to some extent. If people don't know him, many people do know him. He led the civil rights movement in Birmingham, and he actually came to Birmingham in 1953 as a young Baptist minister, and he started organizing movement meetings in 60 of the Black churches in Birmingham. Every Monday night there would be a movement meeting. So he was a great leader, he was sort of the general. He had a plan. He implemented the plan. He was a great manager. And he organized Birmingham. And then he invited King to come to Birmingham in 1963. So he and King and Abernathy really were the three leaders of a lot of the efforts around the civil rights movement. And he was just a real hero of mine. I was fortunate through the Civil Rights Institute and through Leadership Birmingham to meet him early on, and we became close friends. I was the matron of honor in his wedding when he remarried in 2006, which was a great, great honor for me. So I loved Fred, and he was a great teacher. You know, he talked about how you bring people together. I'm always saying now, where are you, Fred? We need you now in these days. But it's so much fun to see our mayors step up and see the leadership that's going on all over the country. I think primarily with mayors and governors to again try to help us move forward in this difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm. I read that Reverend Shuttlesworth said, this is a quote, "Confrontation is not bad. Goodness is supposed to confront evil." What do you think about that quote?
Well, I think Fred used to say, "I'm a fighter, not a writer." I was always encouraging him to write an autobiography. There've been biographies written about him, but he got a fighter, not a writer. And he also said, "Birmingham gave me a hard head for a hard city." But I do think that confrontation, it takes both. It takes both. It's just, we have to face things head on. And in the case of civil rights, it's a harder conversation and a harder confrontation. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important.
Mm-hmm. As a white woman, and I'm a white male, you're closer to these sorts of issues than I am. What sorts of wisdom could you share for myself and others about how to support the community, the Black community, all people who feel that there's inequality and injustice happening? I'm curious what you might share with those of us that aren't as close to it as you are.
Well, I would say, I'll tell you what I'm doing and how I'm trying to have a more honest conversation with myself around that topic. I think that I am going back and I'm rewatching Eyes on the Prize, which is a documentary about the civil rights movement in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. People haven't seen Skip Gates' PBS series on African Americans. I mean, I think there are things that are important as white people in America, that we educate ourselves about the history, the real history that happened in the Black community. Another thing I'm doing is, and I think there's a book, an extraordinary book, called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi. And I have actually joined a group of women who are mostly Southern, but living all over the United States. And we have an How to Be an Anti-Racist book club. And we are, as white women, thinking about how do we build an anti-racist strategy. So I would recommend reading that book. I would recommend really, as other white people in America, to educate ourselves and to listen. I mean, this is about people. Everybody wants to be heard. As a woman in business, everyone needs to be heard. So I think it's time to listen and to educate from a white perspective, and then with our friends and brothers and sisters to have a deeper conversation. And it's really important in healing this country, I believe.
That is wonderful. I love what you're saying there. And these are actionable things that we can do. What about just a one-on-one interaction? Say, a friend or a friend of a friend, or a peer within your business or something like that who is Black. As a white person, what is the best way to interact? And maybe that sounds funny to some, but to others, they want to understand better, but they're uncomfortable. What sort of wisdom can you share for those that feel that way?
Again, I think I would say be kind and listen. Mm-hmm. If somebody wants to talk about it, they'll talk about it. I think a lot of people are feeling uncomfortable trying to bridge the conversation. And I think you just be yourself. And again, you love the people you love and you know the people you know. And this doesn't change that. It's just, I think it's possible to have one-on-one conversations. I've had a number of conversations with close friends of mine about this, just about what, the events of the today, of what are going on. I have a nephew who has been to so many protests. It's just, I'm trying to kind of keep up. Everyone seems to be younger again. I'm not quite as young. So, but I think that keeping up with the news and talking about that, and then relaxing and listening, to me, I think educating ourselves and listening is really what's in order. And then thinking about how do we change policy. You know, the beauty of this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, it's all about changing policy. We have systems that don't work. And I've done a lot of urban redevelopment, and I've looked at programs in housing that we've put in place that just do not work. You know, you can look at mass incarceration and the programs and systems that evolved around these industries, and they're just broken. So we've got to be thinking creatively about how we can replace those broken systems with something that works for everybody.
Mm-hmm. You've in your business, you've been able to do some transformations from a real estate standpoint. Can you talk about Park Place? And then I have a follow-up question to that, but let's just start there.
Well, Park Place was Birmingham's first Hope 6 neighborhood, and it's a program that was put together by HUD. And the idea, again, a bad choice, was to concentrate public housing, poverty in public housing around the United States. And it just did not work. And the idea of scattered site housing, of mixed income housing, of, again, building neighborhoods that are more balanced, was a new policy that HUD adopted. And Birmingham received a grant from HUD to build a new neighborhood on the site of an old neighborhood called Metropolitan Gardens. And we were working with a developer out of Atlanta, chosen to help make that neighborhood happen. So for me, it was an extraordinary experience. I got very involved. I had an apartment. I got to know the residents in the neighborhood. A lot of people had lived there. This was a very poor neighborhood. It was called the poorest zip code in America, well known for that. There was a lot of crime. It was right in our downtown. And the housing was a wreck. It needed to be rebuilt. So we were able to work with the residents. And again, it's when you talk about rebuilding a neighborhood, when there was a neighborhood there, even though there were a lot of problems, it was so important to listen to the neighborhood and what they wanted, because it was their neighborhood and what they lived. So we were just a facilitator to help them think about how this neighborhood would be rebuilt. And through those conversations, we heard that gardening was very important. And so today there's an amazing community garden, organic urban farm kids program. There had been a school there before that was closed down, and with help from Fred Shuttlesworth and working with the Birmingham School Board, there's now a wonderful school, really considered the best school in the Birmingham public system. We built a YMCA youth development center for kids. And then we connected the dots. There's a park there. So we really, listening again to the neighbors and the neighborhood and what they cared about, were able to put in place programs that worked that brought everybody together. Because this was about bringing families, market rate families, subsidized families, workforce housing families, low income tax credit families. So these were families that might not know each other because they've been living in more segregated neighborhoods. So they said, if we're going to be a community, we need reasons and ways that we can get to know each other. And so that was gardening and the park and the school and a lot of kids programs. And it's just, how do you build community? So it's a little bit we all learned a lot in the process. But it was a wonderful project, and it's been great for our city.
Yeah, I read that it's now a jewel in the downtown area.
Yeah. It's, to me, it's a model for how we should rebuild all urban neighborhoods, because again, the system was put in place to put work over here and shopping over there and housing over here, and then neighborhoods were segregated and schools were segregated. So the question for all of us is, how can we build neighborhoods that come together and work for everybody, that are much more balanced? And I think you start there with income choices in housing, so that you can have mixed income families living together comfortably.
And when you started to think about this, I was curious. I read that you were a Loeb Fellow at Harvard, describing it as it was like dying and going to heaven. And I read that you studied new urbanism. Can you talk about that?
Well, I love cities, so I really studied urban planning primarily. But the fellowship that I was given, which was through the GSD, the Graduate School of Design at Harvard, allowed us to take classes at any school that we wanted to. So, I was more like a kid. I said, dying going to heaven, more like a kid in a candy shop. So I spent a lot of time at the Kennedy School and at the GSD and at the business school, and we were able to go to MIT as well. So I just took classes all day, every day, as many as I could on many different topics, which was the fun part. And then I stayed a second year as a visiting scholar, and I was really able to reflect on what all I had been soaking in for the first year. The work that I did at the GSD through the Graduate School of Design, which is an extraordinary school at Harvard, was looking at how we build healthy neighborhoods. A big chunk of my life was trying to convince people to come back into the urban core because I hated suburban sprawl and cutting down trees and taking out farmlands. But then cities started growing so quickly and getting so expensive that wasn't working either. So it really, now I think the conversation that we all have to have, and COVID again is changing this conversation again, because people are probably going to move back, maybe moving back out, or maybe we'll have a more balanced way of living across this country. But to me, it's really, how do we build equitable neighborhoods, balanced neighborhoods, and healthy neighborhoods, thinking in terms of the environment and community.
Mm. When you talk about that kind of neighborhood, it gets me thinking a bit about interconnectedness. And I'm curious how you defined how we as a society are interconnected.
Well, I think we're all connected. I was listening to a podcast. I've fallen in love with your podcast. This was another one last night. I think I was listening to Tara Brock last night talking about, it was a poem she quoted about that we are all, it's just a broken heart that came apart, and we're living is knitting that broken heart back together, so that we are really all one voice, one conversation. And that's what I found in my work. I've worked in different cities with different mayors, and what you realize very quickly is all cities are in the same conversation. So there is an interconnectedness and an interdependency that goes on all the time, and you just have to look for it because it's right in front of you.
Mm. How are we doing with this?
I think we're doing okay. I think that, I've spent a lot of time on rivers. When I was young, my son and husband, we would take these river trips on beautiful, wild and scenic rivers. I was a paddler. Mm. And, when you're moving down a river, you have to go through rapids, and you have to sort of prepare to move through. So we're definitely in a rapid right now. But I think we're all, and COVID, as awful as this is, extraordinary, is, it's forced us all to slow down a lot. And I think that slowing down is, for me, it is the answer in so many ways. It helps you see things more clearly. It helps me be more present. So I think, when you think about the number of people now who are meditating, doing yoga, and, there's so many wonderful things. Again, out of the protests, we're all starting to have this much, much deeper conversation around race in America. So important. So I'm very optimistic. I know it's hard right now, but I think we'll get through this rapid. We'll get through this pandemic, and we're going to come out on the other side of it better, I believe. Mm-hmm.
You and I, before we started recording, we were talking about another person who's close, that you are close with, and a mentor, Odessa Woolfolk. Yeah. And I read a quote from her, which went like this: "I don't think anybody who has been successful has had a pain-free life. Pain, embarrassment, falling on your face, those are motivators." And I thought a little bit about what all is going on with everybody individually, and then all of us kind of interconnected, as we've been saying. And I'd love to get your thoughts. And you even mentioned you spoke with her recently, and I'd be curious how she's doing and feeling about everything that's going on.
Well, I spoke with her yesterday for about an hour, and Odessa is one of my really great heroes and a great teacher to me. She is a teacher. She was a teacher, has always been a teacher. She's in Birmingham. She's the matriarch of the Civil Rights Institute, and she's just a wise soul. She really has an ability to put things in perspective. We talked about the book she's reading. She's a great lover of history. So she's always reading. I'm always trying to encourage her to write more because her own history is so remarkable. But she's doing fine. She said she gets with a few girlfriends and sits outside in the backyard and visits occasionally. She's having a hard time, she has a bad knee, so I'm always hoping that she's taking walks, but she said it's a little bit harder to get out because she's getting older too. But she's just one of the really bright lights of our city and has meant so much to so many of us. It's a great joy to know her.
What about your thoughts as we navigate through this COVID pandemic, the type of leadership, and I'll say that at all levels, there's national leadership, there's worldwide leadership, there's, local leadership, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's just each and every one of us. And, I think you spoke to the each and every one of us with being kind, you being, ensuring that you bring kindness to the world each and every day and love. But what about the type of leadership at the higher levels? What do you think needs to take place as we move forward and past the pandemic?
Well, I'm a big fan of mayors. I just think we should let mayors run the world. I've worked with so many mayors around the country through some great programs, and I think leadership is critical, and we have to have leaders who genuinely love and care about the place that they govern. And I worry a little bit about our leadership, but I'm hopeful that through this shift in leadership, more away really from Washington more to the governors and to the mayors. I mean, again, I look to the mayors for hope, is that we're growing our leadership skills. And the mayors are louder. They have the spotlight now. Mm-hmm. They're the ones. Again, I'm so amazed by our very young mayor, Randall Woodfin, is an extraordinary man, and he's really leading in the most incredible way. So we're seeing that played out all across the country. We'll see. That's a tough one. I think we all have to get involved. It's just important that we get involved, vote. We can't knock on doors now. I've knocked on some doors, but make phone calls, do what we can to get behind the candidates that we think are going to do the best for the most people, that will bring us together in a unified way.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking with our mutual friend, Ashish.
Yeah.
And he shared with me such a kind act. And he probably would be mad at me for bringing this up, but I'm bringing it up anyway. And it was just a small thing that he did. He received a product from China, and he noticed that there was an email address that said, if you have any problems or concerns, email us and we'll take care of it. And he decided to email them and thank them for creating the product and hoping them well and wishing them well, I should say, and hoping that they're all staying safe and healthy, knowing that they were going in to, make these products while there was, with COVID. And, it's just a small act of kindness that actually transcended our borders and, kind of reminds us about there's other regular people in the rest of the world. And I'm curious, your thoughts on going beyond our country here in the United States, our connection to those far, far away, whether it be in China or wherever else, and how can we make a difference here?
Well, we are one world, and we are a global world. I mean, we are a global economy, we are a global world, and we have to think beyond just our borders. I think that's really important. Ashish again has such a big heart, and he is such a kind man and also a great teacher. And he works more on an international stage, I would say. You know, I have a friend, and she said you can either work on a local stage, a national stage, or an international stage, but it's hard to do all three. But you know, really, you do have to do all of the above. It's like it has to be both and. My favorite expression is act locally, you know, think globally, act locally, because that formula works for me. So I think, again, we have to think beyond. It's not just us. It's not just our neighborhood, my neighborhood, your neighborhood. And people are suffering all over the world. You know, I'm seeing so much in our city and in our state. I mean, some of the poorest parts of Alabama now are the areas that are most affected by COVID. So it's heartbreaking. And I worry so much. I've spent a little time in India, and and in South Africa, and seeing the townships and how people live so close together, just the density and the fear of this pandemic. And, you know, I'm very fortunate to have a little space around me, but I, you know, send out prayers every day. And I think it's critical that we let people know that we care about them too, because we are all in this together. Absolutely. We're in one boat together here.
How can we do that? How can we let somebody on the other side of the world know how much we care?
Well, you can do what Ashish did. You can send a note, or I mean, if you think about people, you know, even locally who have families, I have lots of friends whose families are in different countries. You know, they've been in this country for one generation, or they're immigrants to this country. And so I think look around locally again. You can act locally and think globally. But it's just thinking beyond our borders, which I think we all have to do.
It's wonderful advice. Cathy, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today.
Well, I love being with you always. This was a great time to reconnect, and thank you so much for including me. I
thank you for that, and I feel so fortunate to have met you and to have had the opportunity to speak with you off the podcast, and now here to have this absolute thrill to spend time with you and sharing this with the world. So maybe there's some nuggets in here that some people will find. I know I did. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Well, great. And I hope you'll come visit in Birmingham soon.
Let's all get down to Birmingham, Alabama, folks. I think.
And this will be over. So please come visit.
We will be there. And to all the listeners of the podcast, I greatly appreciate you spending time with us today. And I wish you all love and gratitude.